The last stand in the throne hall. The throne hall of the jailer empire trembled under a storm of explosions. Crystal walls cracked like glass as red alarms echoed through the palace. Alien guards ran in panic, dropping their weapons and abandoning their posts. The mighty royal banners burned from the ceiling, torn apart by the shockwaves. The once shining marble floor was now covered in smoke and broken glass, and in the middle of it all stood Queen Sarathia. Frozen in disbelief, she had ruled 10 star systems, commanded fleets larger than worlds, yet at this moment she was alone, watching her own people flee from her side. Her golden armor shimmered faintly in the dying light as she whispered to herself, "They were supposed to protect me." But her words vanished under the next explosion. Only one figure didn't move, a human soldier named Captain Elias Ward. His Terran combat armor was scratched, scorched, and half-burnt, but he stood tall in front of the throne, plasma rifle aimed toward the shattered entrance. Elias was not supposed to be there for battle. He was assigned as a diplomatic escort, a guest in a foreign empire meant to ensure peace between humans and the Jailar. Yet when chaos began, when the guards deserted, and the halls filled with smoke, he didn't run. He didn't think about orders, he simply stayed. The Queen's wide eyes met his through the haze. She couldn't understand why a single human would stand when thousands of her own soldiers had fled. A deep rumble shook the floor. The heavy blast doors bent inward, bright red plasma cutting through the metal like paper. The attackers were coming. Sarathia stumbled backward, clutching her wounded arm, the crown slipping from her head and rolling across the floor. Elias turned slightly, his voice calm and steady. "Your Majesty, behind me, stay low." She obeyed without words, the sight of his determination freezing her in place. Outside, the sound of alien war cries echoed. Her own generals had betrayed her. They had declared her weak for negotiating with humans, and now they sought to end her reign. Elias checked his weapon, the last power cell blinking red. He looked around, scanning for a fallback point. He spotted the heavy columns lining the hall and motioned for the Queen to move behind them. When she hesitated, he pulled her gently but firmly to cover. "We can still make it out, but you have to trust me." Sarathia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear, not of death, but of being forgotten. Betrayed by her own kind, she whispered, "Why do you stay, human? This isn't your fight." Elias didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the glowing breach ahead. Then he said softly, "Because you haven't left yet." The first wave of attackers burst through, armored soldiers carrying energy blades, their eyes cold and confident. They didn't expect resistance, but Elias met them head-on, firing controlled bursts that lit the hall like lightning. The first 2 fell instantly, their armor scorched by human plasma. The rest scattered behind cover. Returning fire, the walls erupted with sparks, the air thick with heat. Sarathia covered her ears as the noise became deafening. Elias moved with purpose, not fear. Every step measured, every shot precise, like he had done this 1,000 times before. When his rifle overheated, he switched to his sidearm, his armor smoking, but his voice steady. "They're not getting through me." Sarathia peeked from behind the column, watching him fight alone against a dozen. The sight burned into her mind. Humans were supposed to be fragile, emotional creatures, yet here was one, standing like iron while her own people ran. One of the rebels shouted through the smoke, "Stand down, Terran. This is not your war," Elias replied between bursts. "Then stop making it my problem," and shot the rebel's weapon hand clean off. The others hesitated, some even backing away, confusion spreading. How could one soldier hold the royal hall alone? A plasma grenade rolled near Elias's feet. He kicked it back toward the attackers and dived behind cover, the blast tearing half the gate apart. Shards of molten metal rained across the hall, one piece slicing through his shoulder plate. But he didn't stop. He groaned, reloaded, and stood again, the rifle humming with low power. The Queen crawled closer, trembling. "You can't fight them all." Elias looked at her and smiled faintly. "I don't need to fight them all. Just enough." Another explosion shook the palace, this time closer. The roof cracked and sunlight pierced through the smoke. Dust and ash rained down, painting everything gray in that strange light. Elias looked almost like a ghost or a legend being born. Sarathia felt something shift inside her. The pride of an empress replaced by respect, by guilt, by awe. She realized that this human, who owed her nothing, was fighting harder for her life than those who swore eternal loyalty. Outside, she could hear retreating footsteps, the rebels regrouping, preparing a larger assault. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. blood dripping from his wound. "We can't stay here much longer," he said. "There has to be a tunnel or escape route." The queen nodded weakly. "There is beneath the throne, but only the royal blood can open it." He helped her up, guiding her toward the throne despite the falling debris, every movement slow but steady. When they reached it, she pressed her hand on a hidden panel. The floor opened with a deep metallic sound, revealing a narrow passage leading into darkness. Elias looked back one last time at the ruined hall, the place where loyalty had been tested and found. He turned to her. "Go first, I'll cover you." Sarathia paused, her voice quiet but full of wonder. "You're not afraid?" Elias glanced at the burning entrance where shadows moved closer, and replied, "Fear doesn't stop bullets, Queen. Moving does." He raised his rifle again, the last of his power cell glowing faintly. As she descended into the tunnel, she looked back and saw him framed in smoke and light, standing alone against an army. And in that moment, Queen Sarathia of Jalar understood something no alien ever had before. Humanity didn't fight for orders or crowns. They fought for choice, for loyalty, for heart. The hall roared with fire again, and the legend of the human guard began. The enemy. Within, the tunnel beneath the throne hall was narrow and cold, the walls pulsing with faint blue light from ancient alien circuitry. The air smelled of dust and metal. Each echo of their steps sounded like thunder in the silence. Queen Sarathia clutched her injured arm, her breath uneven while Elias walked behind her, rifle raised, scanning every corner, his armor cracked, sparks flickering from his shoulder plate, but his eyes sharp as ever. Behind them the palace groaned, distant explosions rumbling like the heartbeat of a dying world. The throne hall was gone, but the war above still raged. Sarathia stopped near a junction where the tunnel split into 3 paths. She hesitated, looking at the inscriptions carved into the walls. "These passages were built centuries ago," she whispered. "Even I don't remember all of them." Elias stepped closer, studying the faint symbols glowing under the dust, his voice calm. "One leads to freedom, the others to death traps, right?" The queen nodded, her tone bitter. "My ancestors built these to escape assassins. Seems fitting now." He glanced down the left corridor. The floor flickered like static. Traps, motion sensors, maybe. Human instinct warned him. "Middle one," he said firmly. Sarathia blinked. "How do you know?" Elias smirked. "Call it human gut feeling," and moved ahead without waiting. They walked for minutes that felt like hours, every sound magnified in the stillness. The hum of plasma cells, the dripping of condensation, the soft trembling of the ground as the palace above continued to fall. Sarathia's mind was racing, her council, her generals. Her own blood had betrayed her, all because she had signed the peace accord with Earth. She glanced at Elias, the human soldier who risked his life for her, the very species her people once mocked as primitive, weak, unpredictable. Now that same unpredictability was saving her life. Suddenly Elias raised his hand, halting her, his visor dimmed, switching to thermal mode. Faint heat signatures flickered ahead. "Movement," he whispered. "We're not alone," and crouched low. Sarathia froze. "Who?" Before he could answer, a flash of blue light burst from the shadows. A plasma bolt. Elias reacted instantly, spinning and firing back, the beam striking the wall inches from her face. Figures emerged from the darkness, tall, armored, and carrying the crest of the royal guard. But their weapons were drawn, their eyes hard. "Your Majesty," one of them said coldly, "you are under arrest by order of the High Council." Sarathia's voice trembled. "You serve me, not them," the lead soldier sneered. "You serve no one now, Queen. Your rule ends tonight." Elias stepped forward, rifle aimed at their leader. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice low and dangerous. The alien laughed. "And what will you do? Human die for her?" Elias didn't answer. His finger tightened on the trigger, and before another word was spoken, the tunnel erupted in fire. The gunfight was fast and brutal, beams slicing through the darkness. Elias rolled behind a support pillar, returning precise bursts. 2 guards fell instantly, their armor sparking as they hit the ground. Sarathia ducked behind a console, covering her ears, her eyes wide as the human soldier fought with frightening precision. When the last of the traitors fell, silence returned, heavy and cold. Elias scanned the area, reloaded, and turned to her. "Your guards were expecting us. Someone fed them our path." Sarathia's throat tightened. "That means the council has full control of the palace network." He nodded grimly. They're not trying to capture you. They want to erase you. She sank against the wall, her silver crown long gone, her once glorious empire now filled with shadows. Elias crouched beside her, his tone steady. We can't go back up. They'll have lockdown protocols. Her eyes glistened. They called me a traitor. All because I trusted humanity. He looked at her for a long moment before replying softly. Then let's prove them wrong. He moved to a wall terminal, wires sparking as he pried it open with a combat knife. Alien glyphs flickered on the screen. But he seemed to understand them. Sarathia frowned. You can read that? Elias shrugged. Terran intelligence studies everything, even your alphabet. Within seconds, he rerouted the security grid. The lights dimmed and a hidden passage slid open behind the wall, a maintenance conduit leading deeper underground. Sarathia's surprise turned into faint admiration. Your species learns fast, Elias smiled faintly. We have to. The galaxy keeps trying to kill us. They move through the conduit, crawling under pipes and through narrow shafts. Elias's mind was working fast, piecing together the betrayal, the Council's motive, the pattern of the attacks. This wasn't chaos, it was a coordinated coup, perfectly timed and executed with precision. When they reached the next junction, Elias stopped again, his helmet sensors picking up static, encrypted transmissions. He listened for a moment, then cursed under his breath. They're tracking your biosignature. The Queen's neural crest. Sarathia looked alarmed. They can't, that's forbidden technology. Elias met her eyes. Apparently they stopped caring about laws when they decided to kill you. He pulled out a small Terran device, a disruptor sphere, and activated it, the blue pulse spreading around them like a bubble of silence. All signals jammed, he said. For now. Sarathia stared at him. You came here as a diplomat, yet you fight like a soldier. Elias gave a half smile. Where I come from, those jobs are the same thing. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of humming machinery filled the tunnel. Sarathia finally said softly, Captain, why do you do this? You could have left me. Saved yourself. Elias looked ahead, his expression unreadable. Maybe I stayed because someone has to remind your kind what loyalty looks like. The Queen's eyes lowered, shame flickering across her face. My people don't understand loyalty anymore. Elias adjusted his rifle. Then maybe that's why the galaxy still needs humans. In the distance, a low rumble shook the ground. The enemy regrouping again, Sarathia stood, determination burning in her eyes. Then let's show them what loyalty truly means. Elias nodded, reloading his weapon. Now you're talking, Your Majesty. Together they disappeared deeper into the tunnels. Two fugitives, one alien ruler and one stubborn human, hunted by an empire that had lost its soul. But in the darkness, the first spark of rebellion was born, carried by a single Terran heartbeat. Shadows of betrayal. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, the hum of the royal tunnels fading into a haunting silence. Only the faint glow of Elias's visor cut through the darkness. Sarathia followed closely, her breath visible in the chill, her mind replaying the betrayal above again and again. Every face she had once trusted now burned into memory as an enemy. Elias walked ahead with steady precision, scanning for traps, his boots silent on the metal floor, his armor dimmed to stealth mode. He didn't look back often, but every few minutes, his voice would come through the comm softly. Stay close, Your Majesty, and every time she obeyed. Though the title now felt hollow, the corridor opened into a wide chamber, filled with broken machinery and old data cores covered in dust. Faint blue light blinked from consoles half buried in rubble, and a holographic emblem of the royal crest flickered weakly in the air. Elias approached a terminal, brushing the dust away with his gauntlet. We might find something here, he murmured, plugging a Terran interface into the alien port. Sarathia watched him work, confused and curious. How can your technology connect with ours? Elias replied without looking up. We make it compatible. Humans don't wait for permission to understand things. The screen lit up with streams of alien code, the human device translating it line by line. Then a name appeared, glowing red. Lord Kareth, Supreme Advisor to the Queen. Sarathia's heart sank. No, it can't be. Elias's expression hardened. You know him. She nodded slowly. He was like a father to me. Elias scrolled through the logs, revealing encrypted transmissions. Then your father just sold you to your enemies. The message was short and cruel. Once the queen is eliminated, the council will recognize Kareth as Emperor Regent. All human relations terminated. Sarathia felt her knees weaken. She gripped the edge of a console for balance. He wanted peace with humans destroyed. Not me, Elias shook his head. No, he wanted power. And peace stood in his way. For a long moment, the queen didn't speak. Her glowing eyes dimmed with grief. Elias turned off the terminal and stood quietly beside her. His presence calm, steady, grounding. He didn't offer sympathy, just silence. And somehow that was more comforting. Finally, Sarathia whispered, "Do humans feel betrayal this deeply?" Elias's jaw tightened. "We do, but we don't let it own us. We turn it into reason." She looked at him. Reason for what? He met her gaze. To fight smarter next time. Before she could respond, a faint beep echoed from his wrist display. Motion sensors picking up heat signatures approaching fast, he cursed under his breath. "We've been traced again." Sarathia's eyes widened. "How?" Elias tapped the side of his helmet. "Your crest is shielded, but not your royal blood. Your DNA carries a trace beacon. The council embedded it in all highborns." She stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible." He gave a grim smile. "Apparently not anymore." He grabbed a small injector from his belt. "This will mask your signal temporarily, but it'll sting." Sarathia hesitated. "You're asking me to trust you again, human?" Elias smirked faintly. "I haven't given you a reason not to yet." She extended her arm silently, and he injected the serum. She flinched as it burned through her veins, the glow under her skin dimming slightly. He checked the scanner again. "Good. We've bought time." They moved deeper into the complex, passing through chambers filled with the relics of the Jalar Empire's early wars, statues of ancient queens, banners of conquest, and walls engraved with tales of dominion, all symbols of power built on fear. Sarathia stared at them, her voice soft. "We built an empire of obedience, not loyalty," Elias replied quietly. "And now you see what happens when fear breaks." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Humans build on trust, don't they?" He nodded. "When we can, yes, but sometimes we build on madness too. Depends on the day." A small laugh escaped her lips, the first since the siege began. "You are a strange species," Elias glanced at her. "We get that a lot." As they reached another sealed gate, Elias scanned the lock, triple encrypted with royal security. "Only you can open this one," he said. Sarathia stepped forward, placing her palm against the scanner, her biosignature activating the mechanism. The gate slowly rose with a mechanical groan. Beyond it lay a long bridge suspended over a glowing abyss, an ancient power core that once fueled the palace. Now dormant and cracked, Elias peered across. "This is your escape route?" Sarathia shook her head. "No, this leads to the royal archives, where every secret of my empire is stored." He smiled faintly. "Then that's exactly where we need to go." Halfway across the bridge, alarms blared again, red lights flashing. Elias spun around, the gate behind them closing. The council had found them. Dozens of drone sentries rose from the darkness below, their optics glowing crimson. Targeting beams converging on the pair, Sarathia gasped. "We're trapped." Elias took a deep breath, lifting his rifle. "Then we fight where we stand." The drones opened fire, plasma bolts streaking across the bridge. Elias moved like lightning, shooting with deadly precision, hitting their cores one after another. The explosions lighting the bridge like fireworks. Sarathia tried to shield herself behind the rail, shouting over the noise, "You'll fall!" Elias shouted back, "Then I'll take a few of them with me." The bridge shook violently as one of the drones crashed into the side. Tearing through the structure, Sarathia slipped, nearly falling into the glowing abyss. But Elias dropped his weapon and grabbed her arm with both hands, straining against the weight. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You should have let me go," he growled through his teeth. "Not my style," and pulled her back with a roar of effort. The two collapsing on the floor as the last drone exploded behind them. They lay there in silence for a long time, breathing hard. The bridge scorched and broken. Finally, Sarathia turned to him and whispered, "You risked your life again." Elias looked at her with a faint smile. "Seems to be a habit." She stared at him for a moment, something unspoken passing between them, a spark of trust, of understanding in that cold, burning ruin. Two worlds that once hated each other began to change, and somewhere deep in the shadows of the Empire, betrayal had just met its first reckoning. The human firewall. The royal archives loomed before them, a cathedral of light buried deep beneath the surface. The walls pulsed with energy from long-forgotten reactors, and the air shimmered with the power of millions of data crystals. Elias stepped forward slowly, his rifle ready, scanning the endless rows of glowing pillars, each one holding centuries of secrets. Sarathia followed beside him, her voice trembling. This place holds everything. Our wars, our inventions, our sins. Elias looked around with quiet awe. And now it's your last refuge. They walked between the towering columns, their reflections flickering in the crystalline walls. Every few seconds, faint tremors shook the floor above. The war still raged in the palace, but now the storm was moving downward. The queen's voice broke the silence. Elias, your species, how did you survive so many wars? He didn't answer right away, checking his scanner. We didn't survive them. We learned to live with the scars. She frowned softly. Scars make you weak. He glanced at her. No, they remind us what strength costs. Suddenly, his helmet flashed red. Motion detected. Multiple hostiles inbound from both ends of the archive tunnel. Elias cursed under his breath. They found us again. Sarathia's eyes widened. They can't breach the archive's defenses, it's sacred law. He turned toward her, voice sharp. Laws mean nothing to those who've already betrayed them. Within seconds, the great doors on both sides of the chamber blew inward, shockwaves rolling through the air. Columns shattered, data crystals rained down like falling stars, and a platoon of armored assassins flooded into the room, their armor glowing with the insignia of the High Council. Elias grabbed the queen and pulled her behind a pillar as plasma bolts sliced through the air. Stay low, he shouted, returning fire in short, precise bursts. The assassins advanced in formation, their shields flickering like glass, their eyes hidden behind mirrored helmets. Sarathia tried to use a nearby console to activate the archive's defense grid, but the interface rejected her commands, flashing a red glyph. Access revoked. She stared in disbelief. They've overridden the royal codes. Elias ducked behind cover. His armor scorched, his voice grim. Then we make our own defense. He reached into a compartment on his belt and pulled out a small black device. A compact sphere with glowing blue rings. Sarathia frowned. What is that? Elias smiled faintly. A Terran combat shield generator, last prototype from the Sol Defense Initiative. Before she could ask more, he slammed it onto the ground. The sphere pulsed and expanded, sending a blue dome of light surging outward. The energy field crackled around them, absorbing the enemy fire, beams scattering harmlessly off its surface. Sarathia watched in shock. You created a barrier strong enough to stop plasma? Elias reloaded calmly. No, just long enough to make them regret attacking. He stepped out of cover. The shield shimmered with each impact, and he fired with precision born of endless training, every shot striking a weak point in the enemy armor. The assassins tried to flank him, but his combat AI adjusted faster, predicting their movements like a game he had already mastered. Sarathia could only watch as the human turned into a wall of fury and light, moving with grace that no machine could copy. His armor's power cells glowed red from overuse, steam hissing from the joints. Yet he didn't stop. When his rifle overheated, he drew a combat knife made from Terran titanium, its blade humming with kinetic energy. He charged into the closest enemy and sliced through armor like fabric, sparks raining across the floor. Sarathia shouted, Elias, there are too many. He gritted his teeth, voice raw. Then they'll have to climb over me to get to you. She could see it now, why humans were feared, not for their weapons, but for their will, the refusal to yield even when logic screamed to surrender. The assassins regrouped, forming a circle around the barrier, firing continuously, their shots creating ripples across the blue field. The generator's glow flickered, weakening. Elias looked at it and muttered, Hold together. Just a little longer. The queen crawled toward the nearest console, desperate. If I can reroute power from the archive core, I can amplify your shield. Elias shouted over the chaos. You'll fry the system. She answered without hesitation. Then it will burn with purpose. Her fingers danced across the holographic keys, and ancient energy surged through the floor. The room blazed with light as the barrier expanded. Elias stepped inside the new glow, his armor absorbing the overload, lightning crackling around him. The attackers faltered, their systems glitching under the energy pulse. Their weapons shutting down one by one. Elias took the opening, moving faster than their eyes could track. He fought with brutal efficiency, a blur of metal and motion, his knife striking with the precision of a machine and the fury of a man. When the last assassin fell, the silence that followed was deafening. Sarathia turned off the overload circuit, her body trembling from the energy backlash, her breath ragged. Elias staggered slightly, his armor smoking, then looked at her with a faint grin. "You did it." She smiled weakly. "No, we did." For a few moments they stood in the dim light, surrounded by shattered data cores and burned armor. Sarathia walked slowly to him, her expression unreadable. "You fight like a machine, but your heart burns brighter than any sun I've known." Elias chuckled softly. "Humans don't shine for beauty, Queen. We shine to survive." Her gaze softened. "Perhaps that's what makes you dangerous." He shrugged. "Or dependable." She looked around the ruined archive and whispered, "This empire was built on fear, but you fight for loyalty." Elias leaned against a pillar, his armor sparking. Fear fades fast, loyalty lasts longer. From above, the sound of more explosions echoed through the tunnels. The battle wasn't over. Sarathia straightened, her royal tone returning. "Then we go to the command vault. If Kareth wants the throne, we'll take it back before he sits on it." Elias nodded, pulling a new power cell from his belt. "Now you're starting to sound human." As they moved toward the vault, side by side through the wreckage, a strange silence settled between them. Not fear, not despair, but understanding. For the first time in her reign, Sarathia didn't feel like a ruler or a symbol. She felt like a soldier, walking beside another and, for Elias Ward, a lone Terran far from home. The Queen of Jalar was no longer just a mission. She was worth protecting. The fall of empires. The climb to the surface was long and brutal. The royal tunnels twisted upward through layers of stone and steel, every wall humming with the echo of distant battle. Elias led the way, his armor dented and glowing faintly from heat damage, but his stride unbroken, every step a defiance against exhaustion. Behind him, Queen Sarathia moved in silence, her royal robes torn, her silver hair stained with ash, yet her eyes burned brighter than any star. She no longer looked like a ruler hiding from death. She looked like a warrior walking toward destiny. The first light they saw wasn't sunlight. It was fire. When they emerged into the ruins of the upper palace, the night sky was alive with flames. Entire towers collapsing into dust, the Empire's banners falling one by one. Elias scanned the horizon through the smoke. Dozens of enemy gunships hovered in the distance, their searchlights sweeping across the shattered city. Sarathia stared at the destruction, whispering, "My empire is dying." Elias turned to her, his tone steady. "Then we make sure it dies with honor." They moved through the wreckage toward the command spire, the heart of Jalar's throne network, where Lord Kareth had declared himself emperor. As they approached, Elias hacked into a broken comm array, static hissing through his helmet. He patched into the enemy channel. Kareth's voice came through, cold and triumphant. "Let it be known across the stars," he declared. "The human alliance ends tonight. The Queen is dead, and Jalar will rise pure once more." Elias smiled grimly. "Guess we should disappoint him." They reached the spire's base. Guarded by elite sentinels in obsidian armor, Sarathia recognized them instantly. The Black Guard sworn to the royal bloodline. Elias crouched behind cover, whispering, "Apparently loyalty's gone out of style." The Queen stepped into the open. Ignoring his warning, her voice echoing across the plaza. "Is this how far you've fallen, soldiers of Jalar? To raise your blades against your crown?" The guards hesitated, their helmets turning slightly. uncertainty flickering like sparks. Elias took the chance, firing 2 quick shots into the ground near their feet, the energy blasts lighting the air. "Make a choice," he shouted. "Follow your traitor, or follow your queen." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the lead guard dropped to one knee. One by one the others followed, their weapons lowered, their loyalty reignited by her voice. Sarathia nodded once. A quiet command. "Take back the gates." Elias looked at her with respect. "You just turned soldiers into believers again," she replied softly. "No, Elias, you reminded them what loyalty feels like." They stormed the spire together, floors trembling under the shock of combat, the halls filled with smoke and light. Elias fought at the front, his movements sharp and ruthless. His armor cracked open but still burning with purpose. The queen followed close behind, using a plasma spear taken from a fallen guard, her strikes swift and precise. Every corner they turned revealed more of her empire's betrayal. Her council chambers filled with schemers, her banners replaced with Kareth's insignia. Yet for every traitor they defeated, more allies joined their cause, drawn by the sight of the human fighting beside their queen. When they reached the throne chamber, the great doors stood open and Lord Kareth waited within, his gold armor gleaming under the firelight. He turned slowly, eyes cold, voice dripping with scorn. "You should have stayed dead, Sarathia." The queen's expression was calm, regal, but her words cut like steel. "And you should have remembered who gave you power to begin with." Kareth laughed. "You let a human lead you here? You think his species can save you?" Elias stepped forward, rifle lowered, voice flat. "I'm not here to save her. I'm here to end you." Kareth drew his blade, energy crackling around it. "Then let the galaxy see what your loyalty buys you." "Terran!" He lunged forward with inhuman speed, his strike slicing through the air like lightning. Elias met the blow with his forearm guard, sparks exploding as metal clashed against plasma. The impact threw him backward, his armor screeching from the force, but he didn't fall. He steadied himself and charged again. Their fight was a storm, brute power against human precision. Kareth swung wide, but Elias ducked, driving his knife into the joint of the alien's armor. Twisting until the circuits burst, Sarathia tried to intervene, but the duel was too fast, too fierce. She could only watch as Elias absorbed hit after hit. Refusing to fall, Kareth roared, "You fight like a beast." Elias smirked, blood running from his lip. "That's what happens when you corner one." With a final surge, he disarmed Kareth, the alien's blade clattering to the floor. Elias stepped back, raising his rifle. "It's over." But before he could fire, Kareth grabbed a fallen plasma core and hurled it at the console beside the throne, triggering an explosion that sent them both flying. Smoke filled the room, debris falling from the ceiling, the sound of collapsing walls echoing through the chamber. Sarathia crawled through the rubble, coughing. Elias, through the haze, she saw him pinned under a collapsed beam, sparks flickering around him. She ran to him, trying to lift it, her voice desperate. "You can't die here." He smiled weakly. "Wasn't planning to." And with her help, he pushed the beam aside, his armor hissing as he stood. Kareth tried to rise again, but the queen stepped forward, her plasma spear glowing bright. She looked down at the traitor who had once been her mentor and whispered, "This empire was born in fear, but it will not die in it." Her strike was swift, clean, final. Kareth fell without another word. Elias leaned against the broken throne. Watching her in silence, Sarathia turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You've changed everything. Terran." He chuckled softly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just reminded you what you already were." She looked at the shattered city beyond the windows, her empire in ruins but her heart unbroken. "For the first time," she said quietly, "I see what humanity truly means." Elias nodded. "We're stubborn, that's all." Outside, the surviving fleets began to retreat, their leaders surrendering to the Queen's signal. The rebellion crumbled within hours, the flames dying as dawn broke across the sky. Elias stood beside her, the two of them watching the sunrise over the wounded capital. And in that light, a new alliance was born, not forged by treaties or fear, but by blood, loyalty, and a single human who stayed when all others fled. The price of loyalty. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than any roar of war. The palace stood in ruins, its golden towers reduced to smoking skeletons, the air thick with dust and ash. Elias Ward sat on the edge of the shattered throne platform, His armor blackened and cracked. One arm barely functional, his breathing slow and shallow. The medics had tried to tend to him, but he had refused to rest until he saw her safe. Queen Sarathia walked through the hall that once symbolized power, now filled with broken banners and the scent of melted stone. She had not changed her clothes or replaced her crown. She looked human in that moment, wounded, tired and alive. When she reached him, Elias tried to stand, but his legs gave out and he dropped back down with a dry laugh. "Don't," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "You've done enough," he smiled faintly. Never thought I'd hear a queen say that. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the faint hum of flickering lights filled the air. Sarathia looked at the Terran soldier beside her, the man who had no reason to stay yet had given everything. "You fought for a world that isn't yours," she whispered. "And now you bleed for it." Elias's eyes drifted toward the broken skylight, where the first rays of dawn filtered through the smoke. "Doesn't matter whose world it is," he said slowly. "Some things are just worth standing for." Her voice trembled slightly. "And what did it cost you?" He chuckled weakly. "An arm, a few ribs, maybe a good night's sleep." "But I'll survive," Sarathia's eyes softened. "Humans always say that, even when you're dying." Elias met her gaze, his tone steady. "Because if we admit we're dying, we stop trying." Outside, the palace courtyard was filled with survivors. Soldiers, civilians, even children, silent, waiting. The queen rose and walked to the broken balcony, the morning wind carrying her voice. "My people," she began, her words echoing through the ruins. "You were deceived by those who feared peace, who feared the strength of trust." She paused, looking down at them, not as subjects but as equals. "This empire will not rise again on fear. It will rise on loyalty, the kind that one human taught me." Elias, listening from behind, looked down, almost embarrassed, but he couldn't help the faint smile that formed on his lips. The crowd below fell to their knees, not out of obedience, but reverence. For the first time in Jalar's long history, their queen spoke not from a throne but from the heart, and at her side stood a broken human whose name they would remember for generations. As the medics carried Elias toward the royal infirmary, Sarathia followed, her steps slow and thoughtful. In the sterile light of the medbay, she stood beside his bed as machines hummed softly, repairing what could be saved. Elias drifted between consciousness and dreams, his mind replaying flashes of the battle, the fire, the screams, the weight of the fallen. When he woke again, she was still there, sitting quietly beside him, watching him breathe. "You should be ruling," he murmured, voice rough. She smiled gently. "I am. In my own way." He looked at her for a long time. "You don't owe me anything, you know." Her gaze was firm. "You're wrong, Elias Ward, I owe you everything." She leaned closer, her tone quiet but filled with power. "You didn't just save my life. You reminded an entire species what it means to stand together." Elias turned his head slightly, smirking. "Not bad for a diplomat, huh?" She laughed softly, the sound echoing like fragile light in the cold room. "You're not a diplomat anymore, Elias. You're something far rarer, a symbol." He frowned. "Symbols are overrated." Her eyes glowed faintly. "Not when they inspire galaxies." Weeks passed, the palace rebuilt itself piece by piece. The queen's banners now carried a new mark, the silver insignia of Terra, crossed with the royal crest of Jalar. The human accord spread across the galaxy, binding former enemies into allies. Some called it the Age of Reconciliation. Others called it the Era of the Oath. But among the soldiers, it was known by a simpler name, the time when the human stayed. Elias recovered slowly, though the scars remained. A reminder of what loyalty cost sometimes. He would stand on the palace balcony at night, watching the twin moons rise. Sarathia would join him, silent for a while before whispering, "Do humans ever stop fighting?" He smiled. "Only when we have something worth protecting." She looked out at the stars, her voice soft but firm. "Then perhaps you should protect this world too." He turned to her, half joking. "You offering me a job?" She met his eyes. "No, I'm offering you a home." Elias didn't answer right away. He simply looked out at the horizon, the alien city rebuilding, the people learning to trust again. He exhaled slowly, the faintest smile on his lips. "Home, huh? Maybe that's the one thing humans never stop fighting for." And under the rising dawn of two suns, a Terran soldier and an alien queen stood side by side, two souls from different worlds, bound by the same truth, that loyalty, once given freely, could change the fate of empires. And though the galaxy would one day forget the wars, the politics, and the crowns, it would never forget the story of the human who stayed. The legend of the human guard years passed, but the story of that night never faded. The palace was rebuilt from ashes, its halls filled with the hum of new life, the wounds of war healing slowly under the light of peace. Yet every wall carried a mark of the battle, and every mark told the same story. The human who stayed. Captain Elias Ward became more than a soldier, more than a man. He became a name whispered in reverence across the stars. Among the Xelar, his name meant courage. Among the humans, it meant unity. And among the younger races, it meant hope. But to Queen Sarathia, it meant something simpler. Loyalty that no crown could command. Each year on the day the empire was reborn, the queen held a silent vigil at the balcony where he once stood. She never spoke of what he said to her that night, but her people knew. Whatever words were shared between human and queen had changed the course of history. Elias never returned to Earth, though the Terran government sent ships and medals. He refused them all. He told Sarathia once, "I wasn't made for parades, Your Majesty." She replied softly, "You weren't made for thrones either. Yet you held one together." He smiled and they both laughed, a rare moment of warmth between two warriors who had already given everything. Time moved differently for the Xelar. Decades passed like seasons. Elias aged slower than any human should have. The queen ensured his body was strengthened with their advanced medicine. When others asked why she preserved him, she simply said, "Because legends deserve to live long enough to see what they built." Under his guidance, the human accord expanded, uniting worlds that had never spoken before. Old enemies became allies. Ancient grudges turned into stories told to children. And through it all, Elias refused titles or statues. "I'm not a hero," he used to say. "I'm just a man who didn't run." But the galaxy never believed him. One night, as the twin moons of Xelar rose high over the capital, Elias stood alone in the gardens of crystal trees, their leaves shimmering like starlight. He looked up at the endless sky, the constellations of two worlds shining together, one Terran, one Xelar forever entwined. Footsteps echoed behind him. Light and graceful, Sarathia approached, no longer just a queen but a legend in her own right. Her hair silver like moonlight, her eyes calm with wisdom. "You still watch the stars as if they'll answer you," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm waiting for the next storm." She shook her head. "You've already weathered enough." They walked side by side in silence, the sound of the wind through the crystal leaves like a song. Finally, Elias spoke, his tone quiet. "Do you ever think about how it all began? That day in the throne hall?" Sarathia nodded slowly. "I do, and I remember the sound, not of war, but of you standing still when everyone else ran." Elias chuckled. "Guess that's all it took." She looked at him. "No, Elias, that's what saved us." He paused, leaning against a pillar, his voice softer now. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that strength isn't about power. It's about who you protect when it costs you everything." Sarathia smiled. "And yet you still protect me after all these years." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Maybe I'm just stubborn." She laughed quietly. "No, Captain, you're human." When Elias Ward finally passed, he did so under the same sky he once fought beneath, his armor polished and resting beside him, the royal insignia of Xelar engraved on his chestplate. The queen stood by his side until his final breath, her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "You stayed, and because of that." The stars changed after his passing. The queen declared a new day of remembrance, the day of the human guard, celebrated across worlds, every species, every soldier. Every child learned his name. Statues of Elias Ward were raised not as symbols of war but of unity. One stood in the great plaza of Xelar Prime, a human figure carved from crystal, standing tall before a rising sun. At the base of the statue, words were written in both Terran and Xelar. "He stayed when all others fled so that we might stand together." Centuries later, explorers on distant planets still told the story. They spoke of the night when an empire fell and a human refused to run, of a queen who found her courage in the shadow of one man's defiance, of a moment when loyalty burned brighter than any weapon, and they called it what it became known across the stars, the legend of the human guard. And in that legend, humanity's truest gift to the galaxy was remembered forever. Not their ships, not their technology, not their wars, but their heart, their courage, and their unbreakable loyalty. Because when the guards abandoned their queen, the humans stayed, and the galaxy never forgot.